From Frankfurt School, this is Studio 57, and I'm William Hungash. This time around, I'm speaking with Charlotte Lambert. Charlotte is a team lead and frankly an expert in everything bachelor admissions at Frankfurt School. She holds both a bachelor's and a master's degree in English literature and is originally from the UK. From our conversation, expect to learn how to best prepare for the assessment center, why there is an admissions interview, and Charlotte's number one tip for international students. For anyone considering applying to Frankfurt School, this episode was made for you. Charlotte, thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Awesome. I'd like to start, I think, by giving us a holistic look at our assessment center. Today, we're obviously here. We want to go through all of admissions at Frankfurt School, probably geared more to prospective students, either coming in next year or in the coming years. Look at the assessment center, try to answer questions that they have for you. I want to look at international students, Germans, look at the various programs, and disclaimers that today we're really talking about the bachelor program, correct?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, cool. So if we first look at the application center, what would you say is the prominent test, right? The first test that you would address? What is either the most difficult or the first that they would encounter? What should we start with?
So the first test that takes place in the assessment centre is the maths test, and this takes around 45 minutes as a maximum. And this is then followed by 4 cognitive tests. And they're a little bit more difficult because these are looking at kind of problem solving. So you're looking at things like deductive reasoning, inductive reasoning. So you're looking at how to solve maybe patterns. If there's a bunch of different images together, which is the next image in the sequence. So they're often tests that you can't necessarily prepare for per se because it's looking at how you kind of solve problems. So those I would say for maths, it's a little bit easier to kind of prepare. You can go over subjects that you've done at school, things like that. Whereas the cognitive tests, they are really looking at problem solving and kind of how you approach these problems. We then have the English test, which then takes place afterwards. This, for most people, isn't too much of a challenge. We're just looking to gauge the English level so that we know that the students are going to be successful when they start their studies. And then we have our interview, which takes place afterwards as well.
So starting with the math test, I remember I applied in 2022. The math test was some sort of practice online.
Yes.
Does that still exist?
Yes, exactly. Okay. So this is available on our homepage.
Sure.
So we will have all those questions available up on our homepage for students to go and look at. There's the solutions there as well. And we have the same thing for the cognitive tests. We actually have some practice questions for those as well that students can go to the homepage of the provider of the cognitive test and they can go through and have a go at those as well.
And for the English, how would you colloquially describe the English level on average that you would recommend or require? Because I think that's a point of stress for a lot of people that are applying that aren't from Anglican countries. And it's funny because I remember taking the admissions test a few years ago. And when I got to the English test, it only took, I don't remember how long it lasted, but it only took a few minutes before the difficulty scaled. And even I felt like my English is insufficient, right? So how would you, or maybe when you get asked this question, how do you address it? And how would you sort of either comfort or describe the bar or the expectation of English coming into Frankfurt School?
So for students who want to study in English, we are looking for B2 English. And for students who want to study in German, we require B1 English. If for whatever reason on that test day you have a terrible time, the English test, your brain goes blank, this isn't a problem because you can also hand in a language certificate afterwards. So if that's necessary, we inform students when they are admitted and they can hand in things like a TOEFL test, an IELTS test, the Cambridge English test, things like that. So fairly standardized English tests. And this is an option for people if for whatever reason on the assessment centre day, the English test doesn't work out as planned.
Got it. And you talked about the German track and the English track. Now, will it be the case that the German track continues to always funnel into English by about the 6th, 7th semester?
Yes. I think it goes in, I think it's from the 4th semester it starts in English.
Okay.
And that's carrying on as normal, yeah.
Okay. So then that's a decision for some students to make, right? German versus English. Do you get asked that question? And if so, how do you help coach them through that choice?
It is a question that comes up quite a lot, especially, of course, from German-speaking students.
Yep.
The course contents of both modules is exactly the same. There is no difference between the English track and the German track. We do have, in the German track, we have our 3-day model and our 6-day model. So the 3-day model is for students who want to go and work with cooperation partners, maybe if they want to work with Deutsche Bank, with KfW, KPMG, then they can choose a 3-day model, and then they need to study in German because it's related to their work, it's related to their concentrations, of course. But even these students then go on from the 4th semester to study in English as well.
Okay. And I can say from my experience that I think that system A was surprising to me. I hadn't seen this in the US, right? It just wasn't this, multilingual environment, different countries, international. I love that 3-day model, just first of all. I have to say, this is a little bit of a tangent, but when I first heard of this idea that you can, work and study, you can get paid, you can be compensated, you can, you do have to serve some number of years working afterwards, but you can also reframe that as you have a job after you graduate.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think that's an awesome opportunity that you guys have. And I meet a lot of Deutsche Bank. One of the other hosts, Viviana, is from Deutsche Bank, and maybe because of her, but I'm always feel like I'm surrounded by the Deutsche Bank dual students.
Okay.
They're very pleasant.
Yeah, I think we have in this, so we have our introductory week is going on right now as we record this.
Yes.
And I think this year we have around 20 students who are starting with Deutsche Bank. So it's always quite a big cohort of people who do work there.
Yes. For the math test, is it true that there are different either requirements or recommendations for the different programs? I'm a CBA student, and I believe that something was done in the last year or two to separate CBA.
Exactly. So for the CBA program, we look closer at the maths results. The maths requirement is slightly higher because CBA as a course is just much more focused on kind of on maths content. So this is something that we check then when the assessment centre is taking place and looking at the results of it. And then if they have really good results, but that maths test just isn't quite there for CBA, we will then let them know, and then they can have the option of either going into the MPE program or the BBA program.
Okay. And so if a student selects a program and then in that coming semester they want to make a change, are you the person that can help talk them through that change? Have you seen students that want to change? Is it easier to change into one track or the other? What's going on there?
So before the program itself starts, this is normally not a problem to change. Of course, we do check, like I said, the maths requirement. If they want to, for example, change into CBA, if they want to go from German to English, obviously they need to have the correct English. This is normally not a problem up to a certain point. Come to around May, June time, it can start to be a little bit more difficult as those programs fill up.
Sure.
So our application deadline is always the 30th of June. And up till that point, we normally have spaces still available. After that, it can really, really be quite difficult to kind of change. So if students are a little bit on the fence, we recommend getting in contact with us as soon as possible, talking to all of my colleagues from the recruitment team. I'm talking to students such as yourself as well. So they're really kind of informed and they really know kind of what decision they can make. And then if they make that early enough, then it shouldn't be an issue for them to change.
Okay, that makes sense. So you sit down for the admissions test. There's the math test, which you can practice for beforehand.
Yeah.
There's the cognitive test, of which there's examples online. There's the English test. If you don't do well or you feel like you had an off day, you can always submit the certificate. And then you have the choice between the German and the English tracks. Then you get to the interview. What is the interview? And what is the objective from the Frankfurt School perspective for having this interview in the admissions process?
So the interview is looking kind of at a few different things. We want to look, of course, at why you want to study to Frankfurt School specifically. Are you familiar with the course? Are you familiar with Frankfurt School as an institution? We are also looking at kind of how you interact with other people as well. So the interview is normally a double interview. So it normally takes place with one other applicant. This is a really nice opportunity for you to network with potential other students. We've quite often have students who then come to get-togethers before the program starts with their interview person, or part of the introductory week they meet up again. So it's a really nice opportunity to get that networking started absolutely from the get-go as well. So we're looking at kind of, how you work with other people, how familiar you are with the program, and just kind of, we're really looking at as to your focus on Frankfurt School and why you want to be here.
I think when I think back to my interview or my admissions process, this was probably the most stressful thing that I had encountered. And it didn't really need to be. I mean, I think it was only like 5 to 15 minutes, something like that. Very simple. It was nice. I sat with another student. I think she unfortunately didn't come, but it was interesting. I'd never sat in an interview with another interviewee before. So that
Yeah.
was also a first for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And because we have students from different countries, sometimes it might be that students maybe from the same country that just happen to be together. Sometimes it will be students from two completely different countries, two completely different cultures. So it's an opportunity to just kind of meet prospective new students and new people.
Definitely. And that prepares you because you're going to be doing that at Frankfurt School anyways.
Yeah,
Right. We
absolutely.
have a huge number of international students.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had in our last intake, so with our student body that started in 2025, I think we had something like 65 different nationalities in the student body.
Wow.
So our international student body is growing year on year.
Great. So that's the admissions process on a high level. What is, when you think of the most common questions that you get asked about this, right? Let's address them now. What, maybe, is there one that stands out in your mind that students are just always asking you, they always want to know?
I think students always ask me, how can I prepare for the assessment centre? This is a question that comes up quite a lot.
Yes.
So my advice is always to be as familiar as possible with Frankfurt School. If students are already listening to this podcast, then they're absolutely going in the right direction. They're already familiarising themselves with Frankfurt School, and be familiar with the programme as well. Take the time, go through the website, maybe take part in trial lectures. We have, for our international students, we have our online bachelor day, which normally takes place around February time, where again, you can talk to students, you can talk to recruiters and everything like that, and just really be sure as to why you kind of want to study at Frankfurt School, and why you think this is the correct place for you. And also the practice questions, I know we've mentioned them now a couple of times already, but those are really, really helpful, just so you kind of got an idea of what the test is going to look like, what the test environment is going to look like, and just make sure, this seems quite a basic thing, but I always say to people, make sure to read all the emails. We send through quite a lot of information before the assessment centre takes place. There's a couple of different systems that you need to log into, so just to make sure that everything is set up, ready to go, so that on the day of the assessment centre you can just sit down, turn on your laptop, and then just do the tests.
It's funny, I had this story in my mind, obviously, and we've talked about this, but in 2022 I took this assessment center, and when you're talking about preparation, that way you're ready to go, I was in my basement of my house in New York. It was 3:00 in the morning, and I thought that I was prepared. I thought that I was ready to go, right? Everyone had gone to bed. I then maybe slept for an hour or two because of the time zone difference. It's at the middle of the night. And I discovered, right, that my Wi-Fi in my house resets itself at 3:00 in the morning every day. And no one had discovered this yet.
Understandably.
So perhaps that's just a lesson, an anecdote in, as prepared as you can be, there might be unexpected events.
Yeah.
I believe I called you and it was no problem.
Yeah.
Right? But I laugh when I think back at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine in the moment that there's nothing more stressful than to have your internet suddenly switch off. But yeah, there are always hiccups. There's always something that goes wrong. If there's some technical factor out of your control, don't worry. The admissions team is always there. We're always just a phone call or an email away, and we can always sort that out on the day of the assessment centre as well.
Amazing. Some other things that pop into my head when we're talking about admissions. At Frankfurt School, obviously, there's a lot of emphasis on extracurriculars. I've talked about this. We have somewhere between 50 and 70 different initiatives growing every year. Being involved in the student body in some way, we have tutors, we have volunteers, ambassadors. There's an emphasis there in a way that I think isn't a given at every university. How do you approach the question of how important is extracurricular involvement as an applicant? Because obviously it's something that we do after you arrive at Frankfurt School. How do you look at extracurriculars before you come?
So we look at those in a few different ways. So when students initially apply to Frankfurt School, they can apply online using our application portal. And then we look at their CV. That's kind of the number one go-to for just sort of an overview. Of course, we look at what students have done academically, but there you can see, this student has maybe done an internship here. They've maybe volunteered at this company. Maybe they've taken part in a competition. We then have an additional information section of the application where students can upload certificates. Again, just kind of evidence of all these additional things that they've done. And there is also the application letter where students can then really go into detail about what it is they have done previously and why they think that experience is relevant. And this information is really useful to us because then it kind of makes you stand out from the crowd. If we're kind of taking a closer look at your application and we see, this person, they have got relevant work experience, they have volunteered, they have taken part in competitions or sports. It kind of shows us that they are they are engaged as a student, and that's something that they might be willing to kind of bring to Frankfurt School when they are studying here as well. So that's really important for the admissions process.
And other than being engaged, are there other qualities that are sort of sub-communicated through that engagement or extracurriculars that you guys value? Is there something like consistency or a work ethic or something similar?
Absolutely. I think the engagement is kind of the number one point, I think, for us. I think work ethic is a really important one. Of course, again, you can see that if somebody's got fantastic grades and they've been working at an internship at the same time, then you can automatically see this person, they have a really strong work ethic. They can manage their time accordingly. So there's kind of different bits of information that you can kind of pull out from that as well.
Okay. And you mentioned the letter.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a big one that I want to talk about because this one is relevant, on a broader sense, not just for prospective students, not just for applications to Frankfurt School, but being literate, the ability to think, read, write.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big one.
Yeah.
Whether you're applying to Frankfurt School or you're doing job applications later. Do I have it correct that you studied English literature for both your bachelor's and your master's?
You do indeed, yes.
Okay. So I would then assume that you have, quite a thorough approach or opinion when it comes to these letters,
Mm-hmm.
and you have read some of them, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So how would you talk about them? What are the good? What are the bad? How would you coach someone through how to approach the application letter to Frankfurt School?
Mm-hmm. So I think now that we are looking, especially in a time of AI, the application letter really is the opportunity to make you stand out from the crowd, to tell us kind of more about who you are. And of course, we do see a lot of letters that have come through with ChatGPT or any other AI system, and they're very much cut and paste. So that application letter is a really an opportunity to tell us about you as a person, and you can really kind of get a sense of who somebody is as well. You can tell when somebody has they've put a prompt into ChatGPT and said write me a letter and just copy and pasted it, or if somebody has not used that and has sat down and kind of thought about it, and this is my experience, and this is why my experience is relevant to this, and that obviously got this literature background just really gains you to kind of helps pull out that information kind of from that letter, and to be able to really see, okay, this person really believes in what they're saying. They're really motivated. They're really enthusiastic. So that kind of literary background has very much kind of helped in the understanding of application letters and scholarship letters, of course, as well.
And is it a conversation also with the application letters of English proficiency? Is this another way in which you gauge it, or should people not really be concerned if their English isn't 100% perfect in their letter?
The application letter isn't our go-to for English proficiency. So if somebody doesn't quite feel confident in their English, for the application letter, that's not a problem because we've got the English test and then eventually also the external certificate as well.
Okay, great. So this is the application process as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I think is interesting is sort of behind the scenes of admissions, the decision-making criteria, how sort of the organization operates. What are some of the skills that are required for you guys to do the job well?
Mm-hmm.
And what might be some of the challenges that you face
Mm-hmm.
in any sense? Time pressure, choosing between applicants.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always told every year that, there's a lot of people applying to Frankfurt School. And as is likely the case, you probably have to turn down students that you would like to admit.
Yeah.
So talking about, the job, what is difficult and what are some of the skills that are required to do it well?
Absolutely. I think the ability to quickly evaluate information. We see so many applications that kind of come through, and it's looking at those and really being able to decide, is this student a good fit for Frankfurt School or not? So in our team, we have a total of 5 people in the undergraduate admissions team, including myself. And we go through, we see so many applications, and it's really important for us to kind of pull out the ones that are a good fit for Frankfurt School. One of the challenges is always, summer is always very much our busiest period. So like I said, the application deadline for the Bachelor of Science and the Bachelor of Arts programs is the 30th of June. For the foundation year, that application deadline's a little earlier. That's the 30th of May. And then we kind of have that busy period in summer when we do always get a rush of applications. So I always recommend to students to apply as early as possible, so that they can get everything organised, so that admissions can provide them with quick and prompt feedback, so that they've got time to organise things like their visa, things like that. And then, I think in terms of, yeah, I think that's very much our busiest time. And then just helping all the students get everything through, get started. Of course, there's always questions to the introductory week. There's always questions to the program start, to housing as well, things like that. So it's just making sure that we can really make sure that everyone's got all the information they need on time.
You mentioned picking out the applicants that you think are the most relevant for Frankfurt School.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything there that we didn't already mention that when you see an application that is immediate, right? Oh, this person might be of a good fit.
We do, of course, look at school grades as well. So we say that students who have got between sort of a German 2.0 to a 2.5, they've got a really good chance of being invited to the assessment centre. If kind of grades are 2.5 or lower, then we will look a bit closer with a bit more critical eye. And that's really when kind of things like external work experience, voluntary work, things like that really come into play.
Okay. So this is also a question that I've heard before. And I think every university is faced with this question of like, is there an exact grade of which I need to get into the university? And I imagine, like you said, it always depends.
Yeah.
Right? Every application is different and you holistically look, it's not just one number.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the case for when applicants initially apply and we make that decision as to whether they can do the assessment centre or not. And that's also the case for after they've completed the assessment centre. So when making that final admission decision, we will look at the results of the assessment centre. But we will also take a second look at that initial application as well. And we will really look at kind of that whole package altogether. And then based on that, we will make that final decision.
That makes sense. Let's switch gears and talk about international students. I myself am an international student, and I believe the situation, at least in Hessen, has changed a little bit in the last few years. What is different when you're an international student? Is it more difficult to apply, and what do people have to keep in mind when applying?
So the changes have actually made it easier for international students, which is, of course, great news for us and great news for them. So this change, it was a law change that came through, I believe, about 4 years ago now, which means that students who in previous years didn't meet those German government set regulations. In previous years, they couldn't study an undergraduate program at Frankfurt School or any university in Hessen. This law change has allowed students who maybe don't meet those requirements, but who are able to study in the country that their school leaving certificate is originally from. They can go through additional testing. At Frankfurt School, we call it the Extended Assessment Centre. And once they've passed that, then they can go into their bachelor program of choice, which has really kind of opened up more opportunities. So we're seeing really skilled students come in from countries like India, students who've maybe done A-levels or done the IB diploma who in previous years couldn't study at Frankfurt School, and now those doors have been opened to them as well, which is great.
That's awesome. In this extended admissions center, is it just a longer version of the tests we previously mentioned, or are there any additives that we didn't cover?
It's a longer version of the normal assessment center. So there's an additional cognitive test that takes place, which is working with clues and kind of solving information with clues. And the interview is then always a one-on-one interview as opposed to a double interview as well.
Interesting. Why is that?
That is so that we can go into detail about more candidates' kind of previous knowledge as well. Sure. So the test is kind of testing to make sure that that academic background is still there. So we're kind of looking at more kind of subject-based knowledge as opposed to kind of motivation and engagement as well.
Okay, and you mentioned the foundation year, this pre-bachelor's experience.
Yeah.
Today we're here to talk about bachelor's, but is there anything that you can tell me about the foundation year? How does it work? Are students ever confronted with a choice between, do I start at FS as a bachelor or do I start as a foundation year? Or is that choice really clearly laid out for them as they apply?
At the beginning of the initial process, that is quite an open decision that students can make themselves. We tend to guide students in the correct direction. So if we notice, this person has applied for foundation year, but actually they'd be a better fit for the bachelor's program, we will inform them, and then vice versa as well. So the foundation year it lasts for a full year, so it's 2 semesters, and it's just kind of an introduction to Frankfurt School. Excuse me. An introduction to Germany as a country, to studying at Frankfurt School and studying in Frankfurt. And it's a really good opportunity to kind of familiarise oneself with the institution, the city, before then starting with the bachelor's program of choice.
And I believe there's a German course that's baked into that foundation year program as well, right?
Yeah, so students have the opportunity to study German language as well, so that then when they do study with the bachelor's, they've got the opportunity then to have a little bit of German knowledge already.
And I can say from the student's perspective, I've seen a lot of these foundation year students, and it really, it is a year. There is an opportunity cost, of course, in anything that you do. But given that, they have a head start right, at FS when they then start their bachelor's. So they then come in, we're in intro week, right now, and they're starting their bachelor's with a year of knowing what's going on, a year of being involved in the initiatives and the extracurriculars. And I've just seen how they can get this head start, and also on the language for international students.
Yeah.
So I've seen sort of the success of the foundation program.
Yeah, definitely. And we have students, I think this year we have had, I think probably about 46, 47 students, something like that, who started into the different bachelor programs of choice. So it's a really good way to start into bachelor.
Great. And very quickly before we move on with that, is there a different foundation year for CBA or MPE, or is it all the same?
It's all the same, yeah. So students have the opportunity to choose a concentration from the second semester, and then this is then more related to either CBA or BBA and MPE, which then gives that, again, it's kind of that initial foothold to say, okay, this is something that I really want to do, or actually to say, no, this is something that I don't want to go. I'd actually like to go in this direction as well. But it's all one part of the foundation, yeah.
Got it. And I'll take a second because we've been throwing around these acronyms.
Yeah.
But obviously, for us, it's like a language.
Yeah,
right?
Of course. Yeah.
BBA is our Bachelor in Business Administration. CBA, which I study, is Computational Business Analytics. MPE is Management Philosophy and Economics. Now, this is a good moment to step back and talk about these three. How do you describe to incoming students or families the differences between these programs? For me, I always say that, they're probably 60 or 70% similar, right? There are some core classes that you're sharing.
Yeah.
And I wound up choosing CBA. How would you go about describing these different three?
So the Bachelor in Business Administration, BBA, is our biggest program. Like I mentioned earlier, we have those German concentrations and the English concentrations as well. And this is, I always say to students, are more kind of our general subject. So you've got the opportunity to choose the concentrations later on in the program. And I think there we have 11 different concentrations that you can choose from. So you get kind of a base, and then you can really decide in what kind of direction that you want to go in as your studies go on. The difference then being to CBA and MPE, there's less concentrations to choose from because that's the two subjects then go in the two different directions. So CBA is kind of, it's very, I'm sure you can talk about it much better than I can, but it's very maths based, very data science based, whereas management philosophy and economics is quite theoretical. It's talking about kind of the background of decision making, how decisions are made, things like that.
Amazing. I just want to make sure that we don't continue throwing those around without the audience making sure that they're on the same page.
Absolutely.
So one question that I was thinking about that I think is very interesting, and the answer might be no, but do you ever have exposure after, your applicants get through the pipeline of the application process and they come out on the other end and they're either Frankfurt School students or a few years later, they're then graduates. Do you see any correlations between the applicants or the characteristics of their applications when they're applying to Frankfurt School and sort of the success outcomes on the other side? Are there any areas in which you can say, this type of signal from applicants typically tends to, come out as a good success outcome?
I think in terms of kind of statistics, I couldn't really say any numbers, but just from kind of that basic level of kind of the organizational skills, of the engagement and things like that. If you notice that during the assessment center, it's quite an applicant is quite chaotic, it may well be that then going into their studies as well, those kind of characteristics then carry on kind of through. Maybe if they're not quite so up to date with the information that they need to be, maybe they don't quite read their emails, things like that. This sometimes does carry on into kind of the first semester. So these are kind of characteristics that we're then looking at.
Okay. And that being said, of course, there's no set in stone outcome, right? I was a very different student and person when I first came to Frankfurt School than I am now in my seventh semester. But I always think it's an interesting question to look at these sort of correlations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And perhaps that's the, CBA statistics perspective. Looking forward to the future, are there any changes in, admissions at Frankfurt School or any trends in the coming years? Is there any sort of mindset shift or changes that students should keep in mind? Or is everything that we're talking about today, the projected outlook?
At the moment, absolutely. So we're starting now our recruitment process for September 2026. So the application portal for September 26 will be open from next week from now. By the time this podcast goes out, it'll be open for about a month. But we always open a year in advance. So for the 1st of September 2025, we'll be opening for September 2026. This information is all correct for September 2026. For September 2027, we are, of course, constantly reevaluating and looking at our processes, seeing the best way we can streamline process, maybe improve things for students, take on board feedback, things like that. So it is possible that things might be in 2 years' time, they might look a little different.
Okay, of course.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to end with our lightning round that has become a staple for the episode. So I'm going to shoot a few questions to you, and anything that comes to your mind, first thing that comes to your mind. What is the number one thing that you love most about Frankfurt School?
The people, the students and the people that I work with. I work with a fantastic close-knit team here. And it's so, especially now in the introductory week, seeing so many students come onto campus being excited to start their studies. We've talked about the internationality a lot. I myself am originally from England. And I would just say this kind of is a real hub of really excited people who are really engaged and who really want to move things forward.
I'm going to give you a second one. Why Germany? So I also came to Germany, and the question I always get is, why did you go from the US to Germany? For yourself, from the UK, what was interesting and appealing to you about living and working in Germany?
I was looking to carry on my studies after I was doing work and travel for a few years, and I was always been thinking about doing a master's. And one of the big things was just the cost difference between masters. So a master's degree in England will set you back around, I believe, £20,000. The master's degree I did at a public university here, which was just then considerably cheaper coming over to Germany.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a bit of a hack, right?
Yeah.
Especially also same deal coming from the US.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Extremely costly educational system. And here, even for a school like Frankfurt School, is significantly cheaper when you benchmark it to the universities in the US.
Yeah.
So I can empathize with that choice. What is the number one tip that you would have for international students who are not in the country, right? They can't come to campus and reach out to somebody. They might be stressed. There might be a time zone difference. They have all these things going on. What might you say to these international students that are applying to Frankfurt School from across the seas?
I think I would have 2 tips. One, get in your application and start getting in contact with us as soon as you possibly can. Visa processes can take sometimes up to a year. I think the visa application process from Morocco now takes approximately 10 months to get to actually get your visa. So we always recommend to get in as early as possible, just so that that's arranged. Of course, sometimes that's not always possible for varying reasons. So then I would just say make sure that you're in contact with the admissions office as much as possible. We're available via phone, via email. You can set up a consultation with us as well. We can sometimes we can get in contact with embassies. We might have a contact person there already to help kind of get that visa process spread along. And then just any queries that just appear, just feel free to kind of come through and contact us about them.
Very good point about the visas.
Yeah.
Right. I think see every year that there are numerous students that unfortunately have visa issues and then have to come a little bit later into the studies.
Yeah.
So definitely get a head start on that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Next question is, what if you're comfortable sharing, what is one of the hardest decisions that you've had to make in admissions? And you can be general here.
Oh, one of the hardest decisions. That's a difficult one. I think scholarship decisions are sometimes some of the most difficult ones, because we do see so many really qualified students just coming through who've maybe got a really good background, and especially kind of when we get to the end of the intake and when most of the scholarships have already been awarded, it can sometimes really just come through to a knife's edge and making that final decision. And then you're really going through the fine print of what have they done, looking at those documents. And it might be that you've got 2 students who are just so very, very similar, but then one student has just got that slight edge on the other one. And that doesn't mean that the other person necessarily is a bad applicant, but it's just that another person has just got that slight, a little bit more of an advantage. Maybe they've done one more internship, things like that. So it's always, those are difficult decisions.
That makes a lot of sense. Final question is, does the timing of an application affect its chances of admission? And I'll insert my anecdote, which is I graduated high school in 2019. And before I graduated, I did the whole American applying to colleges and universities.
Mm.
And I remember when I was 17 or 18 years old, I wasn't the gold standard of applicant, right? And I was applying to some of these schools close to their application deadlines. And it couldn't help but go through my mind that me applying 24 hours before their application deadline probably didn't send the best signal in my preparedness and organization. The question that I'm interested in, perhaps other students, is does that timing, where they land in the application process then affect the outcome?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, that application portal opens a year in advance. The first assessment centre that takes place in German normally takes place around, I think, the end of October. The first English assessment centre takes place around mid-November, so every year. So we do recommend that students kind of get in as early as possible, just because then they've organised everything. The assessment centres and the admissions take place on a rolling basis. So then they take place around once a month, every 6 weeks, up until kind of April, May time. There you're still in with a really good chance. From May, things can start to look a little bit critical. So yeah, our application deadline is the 30th of June. Every year we do get an absolute influx of applicants. You said you applied 24 hours beforehand. We get applicants who apply at 23:59, so 1 minute before the application closes. And of course, then we do have a more critical eye because a lot of the spaces have already been awarded. So yeah, I would say that does play quite an important role.
Okay, so there is also the operational perspective of you're just filling these spots, just like you talked about with the scholarships as time moves on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Charlotte, it was a great pleasure talking to you. You are obviously our resident expert on everything admissions at Frankfurt School. My final question for you, and final, I promise, is for anybody who might be considering working at admissions, what do you love most about the job? And what might you say to them, people who are thinking of working in the space?
I think that it's the same reason for working with Frankfurt School is, again, just working with the people. It's really cool to see people kind of at the beginning of their academic journey, especially working in undergraduate admissions as well. You're looking at people who've just finished school. They're starting to embark on this fantastic journey that they've got before them. Their bachelor degree, they'll have a fantastic time and then go on to do their master's degree. So it's really nice seeing people kind of sit at the beginning of their academic journey and then seeing them kind of where they go on and then seeing how they proceed as well. Like you said, you did the assessment centre 3 years ago now, so it's cool to see that you've got the podcast now that's up and running, and students do come back and they go, I remember we had an issue or that worked out, and it's cool to see you again. And for anyone who wants to work in the field, it's a real good opportunity to engage with new students, engage in education as well, and it's a job that I've really enjoyed doing the past 5 years and happy to carry on.
That's amazing. I mean, it looks to me as a very high impact job. I mean, you are really taking a sculpting hand in creating the student body.
Exactly.
Which is a massive decision point for people in their lives.
Yeah.
Right. Of which university they're coming to. Your system and your yes/no is massively impacting people's educational journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see this when we go out to kind of recruitment fairs as well, and people are they're thinking about what direction they want to go in, what maybe career they're thinking about after studying as well. So it's really interesting to talk to people to see where they want to go and to help them make that final decision.
Amazing. I hope that our prospective students find this conversation very helpful.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me.